Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome once again to Happy Hours of Coaching Session. My name is Ashutosh Bhattodekar, and it's a pleasure to be back with you with a topic, something very different topic, I would say, something more related to building a learning culture in our organizations. And this is something, whichever role we are playing in an organization, this is irrespective of that. Every organization nowadays, we say, has to be more of a learning organization rather than a traditional hierarchical based organization. We need what is called as a learning organization, what is there, right? And I'll talk more about this topic as we go along. Just a quick round of introduction about myself, especially for people who are new or who are attending this session for the first time. My full name is Ashutosh Bhattodekar. I'm based out of Pune, and I work as a transformation lead for one of the engagements. And I do like to come on events like this and present on diverse topics. Those of you who are interested, you can have a look at my YouTube channel, the link of which I'm sharing it to you now in the chat box. We now have almost 130 plus videos on this to help you grow as an agile leader. And the content is going to increase over a period of time. So pretty much a lot of content and whichever roles you're aspiring for, there's a content available on the channel for that, right? So I would request you to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already subscribed. You can also scan the QR code, what you see on this presentation. There's a small QR code, what you can see. And in any case, I'll be displaying this at a later point in time. Once again, welcome back to Happy Hours of Coaching Session, our every, I would say, Friday dose of coming out with something which will help us grow, right? Something which will help us learn and something which will help us grow in our journey, right? So on that note, let me start with the topic. What exactly is this topic all about, and how do we go about and build a learning culture in our organization? As I said, this is not something which only the talent development team or let us say the L&D team does. Okay, so many people actually would have got confused thinking that it is the prerogative of a talent development team to do this. No, this is, I feel, as change agents, as transformation agents, we need to ensure that we set up a learning organization at the end of the day. So this is not a function of talent development. Let me make it clear right at the onset. We as change agents, as transformation agents, are someone who are, I would say, who have a skin in the game in order to build about a continuous learning culture, right? So as a part of our transformation engagement, this is something what we will have to build. This is something what we will have to develop as a part of our repository. All right, so let me start this session with a very interesting quote, and those of you who would have read this book are already aware about this quote. It is called Future Shock by Alvin Toffler, where he says, "The illiterate of 21st century will not be people who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." I think this is a very, very powerful statement of what we all see here, right? Many times when we are going in for change, many times when there is a transformation which is happening, it is very important for our leaders not only to learn something new. See, one misconception we all have with training is that we will always learn something new, but not necessarily. Many times our training can also be to unlearn few things, right? Something which I want to forget about it, right? Something which I don't want to remember because it worked probably well yesterday, but today it's not going to work, right? Today I'll have to unlearn it, and maybe I will have to relearn it again, right? Maybe I'll have to pick up the skills again and relearn it. Not all skills will have something which only we can learn. Many times, something which is in our baggage, we have to shed that baggage. We have to offload that baggage and unlearn something and relearn and pick up some new baggage into our stuff. So that's the quote with which I'm starting, or that's the, I would say, the opening statement, which I would like to make as a part of our continuous learning culture. Moving ahead, what is a continuous learning culture? Now, when I'm talking about a continuous learning culture, Indirectly or directly, I'm referring to our organizations which are in the journey of creating learning organizations. So gone are the days where Mr. Frederick Taylor used to come and say that I'm going to measure an organization by the output it produces. Gone are those days, okay? Today, it's more about outcomes. It's more about what value you're bringing to your customers. And learning organizations are those organizations which will magnify that value. If you go by the traditional Taylorism, as we popularly call it, you are going to look after the head count. You essentially tend to be biased towards the number of people working, and you try to come out with the productivity numbers around it, right? If one person works, this task will be done in 5 days. If 2 people work, it will be done in 2.5 days. But that's not what is learning organization all about. Learning organizations are about changing this currency unit from outcomes to from output to an outcome driven currency, right? So no longer we are concerned with the output. We are more worried about the outcome and how does this outcome translate into a business value. At the end of the day, this is something which has to realize a business value. Now, what is a business value? A business value is something which my organization or my customer, I'm going to give it to them, right? I'm going to give a value at the end of the day to my organization or to the customer for whom I'm working. And that is what comes in as a part of the business value currency, which I'm trying to tell here, right? So as I said, gone are those days, right? Where I can say that, okay, I'll supply you 5 people and then I will deliver this work to you, right? Today, it is more about the business value, right? And it is measured in different currency units, right? If you want, you can have a look at my video. There's a video which I had shot around how to measure business value, right? There are different exchanges, or there are different ways by which business value can be measured. And feel free to watch that video where I've talked about the different ways or the different mechanisms by which the business value is something which can be measured. And one of the very powerful pieces of literature also available is on scrum.org guide, what is there. And again, I'm not recommending any framework here, but it is available on scrum.org site, which is called as evidence-based management guide, which also talks about the business outcomes. What are the critical business outcomes you're going to derive, or how you're going to measure the business outcomes which are there, right? So yes, I mean, that is the business value or the business outcomes of what we talk about, right? So that's a change, that's a tectonic change or a change in currency what we have from measuring output to measuring outcome. And this is where learning organizations facilitate that change. So as you can see, the standard definition, this is coming by Peter Senge in his book, The Fifth Discipline, where he talks about learning organizations are those organizations which continuously expand their capacity. They expand their horizon and they come out with new patterns. They come out with new areas of thinking and the collective leadership. So it's no longer 1 + 1 = 2. It is 1 + 1 is greater than 2. That is the new equation of a learning organization, what we call it, right? And many organizations nowadays, they have been into that journey of a learning organization, as we say, right? I mean, without going into the details of those organizations, there are many organizations which have gone into that journey, which they are transforming themselves, as I said, they're transforming themselves from a productivity-based or a kind of a measure-based organization into an outcome-driven or an outcome-based organization. And this is where the role of a coach is that of a catalyst. So as I said earlier also, one of the important backlog items for us in coaching is also that the ability to transform our organizations into what we call it as a learning-based organization, or how do we go about and convert them or transform them into a learning-based organization, what is there, right? So this is what we call it as a learning-based organization, what we call it, right? So just a quick check here. How many of your organizations you think are learning-based organizations today? Based on the initial definition, which I told you, there's more to the substance as we go along. But how many of you think that your organization is a learning-based organization which is there? And let me see here. in the chat. Yeah, feel free to put it in the chat. Then, of course, I can ask this question later on also. But feel free to put this question in the, response to this question in the chat, so that I know that, yes, at the end of the day, this is yours is a learning-based organization or not, right? So that is what I'm keen to know. Yeah, so I'll just wait for a few seconds before you confirm that whether your organization is a learning-based organization or not. Yeah, let me see the responses here. Yeah, I can see a couple of no. Okay, so I'm getting a empathetic no here from some of you. Interesting. How about others? If you can just quickly let me know, so that then we can move ahead. And obviously, I'll tell you how is it different from a traditional organization as we go along. How is a learning-based organization very drastically different from a traditional organization what we have? Okay, let me see some more responses here as we go along. Okay, so we have people saying, yes, mine is a learning-based organization. Okay, so I'm hoping that whatever I'm going to cover next is something which is applicable, something which you will find in your organization, right? Since you're seeing that it is already a learning-based organization, I'm assuming that whatever I'm going to cover ahead, or whatever things I'm going to talk about ahead, those will be a part and parcel of your learning organization which is there. All right. So on that note, let me try to move ahead. Let me go ahead and let me talk further around this learning-based organization structure. And what are the salient features of this organization structure? What is there? Okay, so if you look at a hallmark of a learning-based organization structure, your learning strategy is something which is linked with your organization strategy. You cannot have a learning strategy disconnected with your organizational strategy. Everyone is in that mode of learning, whether you're a CEO of the organization, whether you're a CIO, any CX, C-suite level personality, a delivery head, a business unit head, you name it, project managers, coaches, scrum masters, product owners, right up to the team members, everyone from CEO to a shop floor person, right? Those are in the learning organization mode, or they are in the learning mode. This is an organization which believes in experimentation. This is an organization which provides that safety net to its employees, which means that, let's say I have learned something, I've attended a training program, I have learned something, and I want to try it out. I'm not prevented from doing that experimentation. Many times people don't experiment because they fear that, you know what, if the experiment fails, I'll be kicked out of the organization, or I might not get that coveted promotion which I've been aspiring for so many years. So that strong psychological safety is something which is very, very important, what is there. Okay. And it is more about collaboration over coordination. By the way, there's a difference between collaboration and coordination. We tend to think they are same terms. There's a fundamental difference between the two terms. This is actually one of my favorite interview questions when I interview change agents and transformation agents. Give me an example of collaboration versus coordination. And many people actually falter at this particular point in time. If you want to know more about this, there's an interesting video I have shot on this. You will again find it in my channel about what is the fundamental difference between coordination and collaboration. Just to put it in a mathematical form, 1 + 1 = 2 is coordination. 1 + 1 > 2 is collaboration. A mathematical formula. I'm trying to put it, make it a little more simplified. And last but definitely not the least, a learning organization is an organization which focuses on outcomes over output. So we are no longer bothered with how many trainings we have done. What was the faculty feedback index and all. We are more concerned with the trainings, what we did, how did it impact my business? Did it lead to a lesser customer defects, more appreciation from the customer, better CSAT score, improvement in the overall competency of the organization? That is the key hallmark of a learner's organization, or a learning organization, as we say. In case you want to know more about psychological safety also, those of you are not aware about it, because I see a lot of questions on LinkedIn. What exactly is psychological safety? Again, I would request you to watch a full-blown video on that. It is available on my channel. Okay, what exactly psychological safety is all about. All right. Now, there is always that trap, what we call it. On the right-hand side, you see that trap. And a very famous movie on this, we all know, based on a real incident, Titanic. We call it as an iceberg effect. Now, many times what we see is that we tend to focus on what is on the top of the surface, right? And we tend to focus on what is called as the top of the iceberg. And that is what is coming as an explicit knowledge. Now, what is explicit knowledge? Explicit knowledge is something which is very, very visible. It is something which both of us will have access to it. For example, any user manual. So let's say both of us join an organization and we are going to get a KT, knowledge transfer from, let's say, the mentor there. That mentor will give us user manual, documents, literature, videos to watch, okay, how to do guide, right, procedures, policies, standard operating process, SOPs. So that comes in explicit knowledge. But unfortunately, friends, this is just a tip of an iceberg, or not even a tip of an iceberg. There is a whole behemoth of knowledge which is below the surface, as you can see. Any guesses what is that knowledge called? What is that knowledge called? Any guesses on that word? It is called not tacit. It is tacit knowledge, T-A-C-I-T. It is not implicit knowledge. I think some of you have mentioned implicit knowledge. On LinkedIn, it is not implicit knowledge. It is tacit knowledge, what we call it. Now, tacit knowledge is something what distinguishes one person from another person. For example, let us take a quick example. Both of us are certified as project managers. Okay, we have done, let's say, XYZ certification from the industry, or both of us are certified as Scrum Masters. Only one of us gets selected for the job. Why? You might have scored more than me in the certification, but although I scored less than you, I could get that job, but you could not get that job. The reason being that I actually overpowered you on the tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is something which is unique, something which is my individual skill. So there cannot be another Messi. Messi is only one in this world. There cannot be another Ronaldo, right? Whatever drawbacks are there, but there are advantages also which are there, right? So there can only be one Messi, there can only be one Ronaldo, right? Both of them know the rules of football game, but one is a star player over the other, right? So that is what is a tacit knowledge, what is there. So as leaders, as change agents, and especially if you are building a learning organization, our focus should be more on building tacit knowledge in our teams, in our transformation, in our organization. Unfortunately, we focus a lot on building explicit knowledge, which is very, very superficial. Again, I'm not saying that it is not important to build explicit knowledge. Definitely that is required. But it is like tacit knowledge is what will distinguish I would say a plain simple dosa from one what you get in Savarna Bhavan in Chennai, right? Or maybe a normal pav bhaji what you get in Pune vis-a-vis a Shiv Sagar pav bhaji, right? I mean, I'm just giving some names of my favorite restaurants where I tend to hang out just to make sure that, the normal chaat what you get in Delhi with vis-a-vis the Bittu chaat house, right? I mean, I'm just giving some examples across the country just to make it clear, right? What is explicit knowledge? What is tacit knowledge? It will distinguish a normal chef from a master chef, as we say, right? Explicit versus tacit knowledge. So as leaders, we have to focus on building tacit knowledge over the explicit knowledge. So that is something what unfortunately we as leaders tend to ignore. We as leaders tend to actually play more on the explicit knowledge rather than focus on tacit knowledge. So even in interviews, the focus should be on evaluating the tacit knowledge of an individual rather than on evaluating the explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge can be memorized. And believe me, I'm bad at memory. So if you ask me to memorize something and do it, I will definitely fail in an interview. But if the interview asks me to apply something, they give me a situation and they ask me to apply something, that is where my tacit knowledge is going to play a very, very important role. So I believe, I hope the difference between explicit and tacit knowledge is well understood. And while we are creating a learning organization, how do we build that tacit knowledge is very, very important, right? Now, how do I build a tacit knowledge? Now, what are the steps? What are the different activities I will use to build a tacit knowledge? So before I reveal the next slide, Anyone has any suggestions on how do we build a tacit knowledge, or how do we ensure that at the end of the day, a tacit knowledge is built? Any suggestions or any pointers around building tacit knowledge over explicit knowledge? Anyone would like to answer it here? And I'm allowing you to unmute yourself if you want to speak quickly. And before I reveal the next slide, you can unmute yourself and speak about it. How to build a tacit knowledge. I'm sure you would have tried it. You would have experimented it in your organizations or in your transformation. So how can you build this tacit knowledge? Because explicit knowledge is very easy to build. But what about tacit knowledge? Yeah, anyone would like to speak? You can unmute yourself. No one wants to speak. Okay. Surprisingly, I thought let's try to make it a little more interactive. If you want to speak, rather than, obviously, I'll be revealing it in a moment. Creating an atmosphere of trust. Okay, that is one part of it. Anything else? Okay, so again, to be very honest, it is not easy to build tacit knowledge, and that's where the real puzzle has to be cracked. It is not at all an easy task. In fact, it might take ages to build that competency of tacit knowledge. Okay, and with attrition looming across the organization, it is also difficult to maintain that. You might reach a level of maturity of building a tacit knowledge, but later on you find that there's a huge attrition in your teams. And what has happened is that knowledge has gone with it, right? So there has to be robust structures in place. There has to be knowledge retention, I would say, frameworks in place, which will ensure that even if the person leaves the organization, the knowledge stays within the organization. The knowledge does not go away with the person, right? Now, what I'm going to show you is some of the steps you might follow, or basically some of the things which will help you build that learning organization, which is there, right? And let me first show you that what could be the different ways by which your knowledge can be, learning can be enhanced. So we all know about the regular learning, right? The fourth one in this chart, which is lecture-oriented learning. And I think we all have gone through this in our schools. We all have gone through our colleges. We all have gone through post-graduation, etc. And the problem with that is, definitely it's a good concept. Okay, I don't deny that lecture-oriented learning. I've directly jumped to the fourth one here on the slide. The problem is it is too theoretical. It requires a lot of patience. Just try to remember the classes when you were in college and school, right? It required a lot of patience to hear what the professor is telling, taking down notes, and then trying to figure out where exactly am I going to use this Pythagoras theorem in my life, right? Or where exactly I'm going to use E is equal to MC square in my life, right? They're trying to figure out that context, right? And no doubt it is a structured approach towards learning. The problem is it is very difficult to retain. You mug up something and you clear the exam, right? That is what you do as a part of your lecture-oriented learning, what is there. Now let us look at the next one. Okay, next one is customized, right? And customized is something which we all started doing when we came into the corporate world, right? So there's some specialized skill what we want to pick up. So there's a training need identification done by our L&D department. They will issue the training need identification to the vendors. Vendors will identify the topics. They will have a call. And then we design a training program and we go through it, right? And then, of course, we have blended, which is in the middle of customized and lecture-oriented. But if you want to build tacit knowledge, these three learnings may not be of use, like customized, blended, and lecture-oriented. What you need are the two extremes on extreme left and extreme right, which is experiential learning process, wherein you experiment something using techniques like design thinking, ideal framework, design sprints, etc., and gamification way of learning, right? I'm sure many of us would have used those Lego bricks in our Scrum Agile trainings, right? Many of us would have used story cubes, right? I use those tools, story cubes, some Lego bricks. Those are some of my favorite tools which I use. In fact, recently I did a 2-day Agile training without a PowerPoint. Okay, this is what I was longing for pandemic work from home to get over. and I did a 2-day training without a single slide. Okay, so there was no projector. In fact, I had strictly told that I don't need a projector in that classroom. Okay, and we had done that entire 2-day training using experiential and gamification techniques, using pen, paper, pencil, flip charts, sticky notes, etc. That is how this entire training was conducted. And as I said, the retention is much more higher in these training modes vis-a-vis the traditional approaches of training. The retention is on the much higher side. So to build implicit knowledge, what you need is think outside the box. What all trainings you can do outside the box in order to make sure that the retention and yes, I mean the ultimate effect is also that the feedback is good. That's a side note around it. But what is more important is participants can correlate with what's happening in their real day-to-day work rather than talking about it something theoretically. You actually build it there, right? It's a different thing about saying that, okay, I know how to prepare a dessert, let's say gajar halwa, using a recipe book and then actually doing it on the kitchen counter, right? There's a difference in that, right? That's what, as I said, distinguishes a normal chef from a master chef, right? So these are the different learning mechanisms, or these are the different, I would say, training mechanisms which you can implement. And believe me, this is something which you can do across the layers in the organization. For example, when I had to design a agile training for the senior leadership team, I had to be cognizant of the fact that they will not be able to devote more than maximum 3 hours they will be able to devote. So how do I crunch a 2-day training program into a 3-hour training program? In fact, they told 2 hours only. We negotiated for 3 hours. We had a coffee break and all in between. But yeah, I mean, that's the real crunch. That is the real crunch what we had to do. That how do I reimagine or how do I redesign the training program for a senior executive team or a senior leadership team, and make sure at the end of the day, we deliver value to them, right? So again, a lot of focus on gamification activities, whether it's the coin game, whether it's the ball throwing game, or whether it's, as I said, the story cubes, or as I said, the cards. There's also something called as improve cards, which I use. So those will be the mechanisms which will actually help you build implicit knowledge in your teams, right? Implicit knowledge will be gained as a result of it. Now, some important traits of a learning organization are that, first of all, the focus is on building T-shaped skills. I'm sure many of us are already aware about T-shaped skills. For those of you who are not aware about T-shaped skills, let me explain. T-shaped skill is, at the end of the day, nothing but creating a team of all-rounders. We don't want specialists, we want all-rounders. So a person, in talking in cricket language, I should also be able to bowl, I should also be able to field well, and I should also be able to bat well. And these are the 3 hallmarks for me to be selected in a one-day international team or a T20 cricket team, right? So a cross-functional team is what a T-shaped skill is, right? So a learning organization, the foundation is that you're building on personal mastery. You're making sure that each and every individual in your transformation over a period of time picks up those T-shaped skills, right? And again, you're not imposing it here. You are going to check the aptitude of that individual and encourage and create learning opportunities for that individual in order to build a T-shaped skills, right? Second, and the most important thing is everyone should have a shared vision. As I said, your learning strategy has to be aligned with your organization strategy. These two cannot be disconnected. And you have different models for it, be it design thinking approach, be it KPAs, right? Key performance areas, OKRs, objectives, key results. So those are the tools, or those are the mechanisms by which we can build it, right? You have to build a culture of problem solving. Unfortunately, we think that problem solving is only something which a scrum master does, right? No, problem solving is something which has to percolate up and down and left and right across the organization. So whether it is CEO, whether it is your delivery head, whether it's your manager, whether it's your product owner, scrum master, everyone has to be involved in problem solving. I think there's a very famous quote, right, by Shiv Khera. If you're not a part of the problem, you cannot be a part of the solution, right? So everyone has to be involved. And we have techniques like Ideal, some of the very popularly used techniques are the problem solving framework, what are there, right? Now, the fourth point is what I always say, right? And I'm sure many of us would have heard this quote. We say that it is not about doing agile, but what it is about, can anyone complete that sentence? It's not doing agile. What is it? Doing agile, and what exactly we say. And that is what is related to the fourth point. What is there? Being agile. Yes, I was waiting for this. I have a slightly different view for it. Okay, I even say that being agile itself is not enough in today's world. It is about thinking agile. That is where your mental models are going to come up, right? How do you think outside the box to create a culture of agility? So it's no longer doing agile, being agile. It is how do I transition? So first of all, if you ask me, doing agile to being agile is transition, not transformation. I'll repeat. Doing agile to being agile is transition. It is not at all transformation. And this is also one more place where I catch people in interviews. When they say, I'm involved in agile transformation. Okay, tell me what you do. People say, you know what, I changed the mindset from doing agile to being agile. I said, that is not transformation. Your transformation is from being agile, you are able to bring in a culture of thinking agile. That is what is transformation. There's a difference between transition and transformation. Again, I'm not publicizing my videos here. This is not a forum for that, but there's already a session which I had done on this as a part of Happy Hours of Coaching. What is transition? What is transformation? What is the difference between the two? You can watch that session and gain knowledge around it. But that is what we say, thinking agile. So that number 4 in that list, in that ladder, as you can see, is what we call it as a mental model. How do I bring my team across the layers, horizontally, vertically, sidewards, inwards, even for that matter, customer team, into thinking agile pattern, which is where we have to do a lot of customization, which is where we have to find out wows, new ways of working. Wow, I call it as ways of working, and bring about a change, mindset change. We have to come into an abundance mindset over a scarcity mindset. So we might have to modify some of the models. We may not be able to use those models in an as-is state. That is what is what we call as a mental model, what is there. And last but not the least, on the top of this pyramid or on the ladder is what we call as the big picture, systems thinking. Think about the entire system. Do not have a piecemeal approach, right? Think about what impact even the smallest change will have on the larger ecosystem. This is where your organization has to contribute. I mean, if at all it has to become a learning organization, this I would say is a 5-stage model which will help your organizations go into that learning zone, go into that zone of a learning organization, as we call it, right? So this framework or this model can be a good, I would say, touch point, or it can be a good blueprint where we can go ahead and build this learning organization, as we say. All right. Moving ahead. Now, if I were to contextualize this journey, and I'm going to take example from my real case where I implemented this. Obviously, I cannot name the client here. I cannot name the organization here. But this is broadly the framework which I had developed and which I had built in this organization where I was there as a transformation lead. And if you look at this model, what you will see is there were definitely trainings which we did. But if you look at the extreme left part, it is mainly related to the explicit knowledge building, right? We had certification program designed for the organization. And this was a certification, not the regular certifications, industry certifications. We had designed it based on our organization needs. We had the entire organization going to the trainings on agile approaches, whether it is Scrum, whether it is Kanban. We had an entire competency building framework and an evaluation framework where we categorized those associates into various levels of competency. That was just one part of it of building explicit knowledge. But soon we realized that this is not going to help us. This is in fact going to put us in a comfort zone. It will more become a number game. So that's when the second piece under Tower came, which was about communities of practice building. We created COPs. We had a Scrum Master community of practice, product owners. We had for coaches also community of practices, architects, business analysts. We had what we call as Friday brown bag session. So every Friday, someone or the other will present on a topic, something like this, happy hour of coaching. But that was more confined to the organization. And slowly, we also started inviting external speakers as a part to bring in that outside in perspective. That also we started doing it, and we had a lot of these webinars, floor walks, events, what's working, what's not working, and the focus was also to talk about the failure story. Not necessarily that everyone has to talk about good things, right? It is not a sweet talk. If you have failed, let us know what has made you fail so that we do not repeat that mistake again. So we had what we also call it as the failure story. So that was the second part of it. Third part of it was customizing the agile framework. We called it as an agile toolbox. Although I don't like that word toolbox, but we called it as a toolbox. We created playbook. We designed a maturity assessment to gauge the maturity of the organization. We created a rich content on the audiovisual library around it. So that if a new person comes in the organization and he or she wants to learn about something, how he or she can learn. Okay, so that's what came in as a part of this journey, which was there. The higher level of maturity, as you can see, was individual mentoring. So we had a mandate. Every leader had a mandate to create a succession plan. Every leader had a mandate to coach and mentor someone, right? So we had experiential learning. As I talked about Lego plays, I talked about story cubes, ideathons, hackathons, etc. So those were the key elements from a scale. If you can see from left-hand side to right-hand side, it's a progress of what we try to achieve, right? And that is what is the hallmark of this continuous learning journey, what we call it. As I said, it was not as smooth as it is appearing here. Okay, just to be very, very sure here, there were a lot of, I would say, there were a lot of times when we had to reverse back to the old ways. We had to revert back to the previous stage just to make sure that we don't lose a track on it. We don't essentially do something which will spoil this entire ecosystem. So yes, I mean, it was a learning curve at the end of the day. But yes, it's a journey. I always say that transformation is a journey. It cannot be a destination, right? So this journey had its own set of pluses and minuses, which were there, right? And as I said, it is at the end of the day, nothing is permanent, as we say, right? I mean, it evolves. Things evolve over a period of time, right? And that is where this journey actually helped us achieve that. I talked about outside in perspective. There was also something called as inside out perspective, but at that I will talk about in the next slide. Okay, what exactly is outside in perspective? How did that, inside out perspective, sorry, how did that help us, right? So that is something, again, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Yeah, I think someone has asked me what is the Agile Toolbox. Agile Toolbox was nothing but a customized framework what we had developed for this organization. We realized that using pure vanilla implementation is not going to work for us. We had to customize something. There were a lot of regulatory requirements. There were a lot of regulatory norms. Plus, this organization was a CMM level organization. So we realized that we had to customize a lot of standard things which were there. And that is what we had it as a part of this journey, what is there. All right. Yeah, let us move ahead. Let us further move ahead. Yeah. And let us further try to understand this. So essentially, what does this achieve, or what exactly did we achieve by doing all this? Let us try to understand. And I'm trying to talk about some internal things which happened as a result of this, and some things which were external around it, right? Some things which were triggered from an external world perspective, which were there. So there were internal elements to this journey. There were external benefits what we achieved. Internally, we found that since we were doing the regular maturity assessments, obviously there was an improvement in the score. And again, word of caution here, it was not just a number game, okay? Because most of the maturity assessments tend to be a number game. It led to a higher motivation, lower attrition. When people got that, we were able to sponsor as costly certificate as an SPC for our associates. I mean, that actually improved our attrition figures, which were there. Also, we had a lot of say on the industry certification. We found that because of this continuous learning culture, there was an improved strike rate as far as RFPs and RFQs were concerned. People were able to articulate the agile solution to our customers in a better way. And we created fungible associates, which means you could deploy associate anywhere, right? You did not wait for the associate. You could deploy the associate anywhere in the organization, right? That's what we found out, right? And those were the critical internal benefits of what we got. What were the external benefits? External benefits were that, as I said, right? I mean, outside in, we had external speakers coming in. We actually created a pool of speakers who went out in conferences and delivered talks. I mean, initially people were reluctant to go out and deliver talks. But under the guidance of speakers, we created more speakers at external events. There was a lot of write-up about the organization in blogs, thought leadership articles across various forums, whether it is LinkedIn articles, whether it is DZone. We found that a lot of people were interested in writing articles. That was the benefit which we found about. And last but not the least, we had our case studies published in industry forums. We had awards and patents created for our framework, and there was a robust rewards and recognition in place. So we could actually have a rewards and recognition approach which was designed and which was very much beneficial. Ultimately, it's resulted in a stronger motivation, right? I mean, if you're going to reward your people, they're going to be strongly motivated, right? And they're going to stay at the end of the day, right? So those were some of the important highlights, or those were some of the key things what came out of this entire journey, right? And those were clearly the key benefits what we found out, right? And then again, this is something, again, I'm repeating, it was not a number game. It was more at a culture level. It was more at a mindset level where this change was brought out. Okay, so that is what we call it as the learning culture, or building a continuous learning culture. Some of the areas where I was involved in building that learning culture across the organization. Now I'm almost at the end of the session. Last slide coming on the screen here. So I have tried to encapsulate this entire journey in an acronym called as LEARN. Okay, and I think we are all very much familiar with the language, which I thought I will explain this. We all know the manifesto values, right? Something over something, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, right? And I'm not going into the rest of the three, but I thought that I will articulate in that language. So a learning organization is an organization which is a leading North Star organization over a lagging organization. Your learning powers it to go to that next level of transformation. Any guesses for E? What exactly could be E in this? I'm asking you to guess the 5 values of this manifesto which are there. Okay, what is E here? What could be the acronym E here? Any guesses? Anyone? Let us see if you can guess it. Anyone? It is something to do with the people. It is something to do with the personality. So a learning organization is an organization which does not consider learning as an expense. It considers learning as a tool for employee engagement. Employee engagement over expenses. At the end of the day, happy employees make that transformation successful. A for Apple? No, it's not A for Apple. It is A for critical advantages over anti-patterns. Rather than being stuck into anti-patterns, you get that first mover advantage. You get that competitor advantage over your competition. Results are for results. So it is at the end of the day, what we call it as results over reactions. Right? Rather than people being frustrated, people not understanding what's happening, we are showing them results. We are showing this is how this competency has improved, right? This is what you were before you were having that competency, and this is where you stand today, right? So that is results over reaction. And last, but definitely not the least, a learning organization is an organization which is nimble over numbness. Right? Many organizations get into that static mode. They lose that motivation. They become numb. So how do I use that learning framework or a learning organization to make my organization more nimble over the numbness which creeps in? So this is my parting slide for this topic. And first of all, thanks everyone for patiently hearing me out. Thanks for listening to me. And yes, we'll be opening up the floor for any questions, but we will be pausing the recording for the questions. And yeah, let me first pause the recording for any questions, because obviously people might have some company related names which might come out. So So once again, thanking all of you for the overwhelming response, and see you all in the next session, Happy Hours of Coaching. Thank you. Bye for now.